Oh, hello there. It's been a busy day for Dr. Mo, and, well, today we're going to look at some things in the microscope. So, this should be fun, right? Alright, let's see. If we look around in here just a little bit, you all can see that, right? Okay. Oh, there's always something moving around in a live pond sample. Here we go. Some of these things that you can see right here are diatoms. And hiding back here among them, many wondrous little pond creatures. That one was a rotifer. Here's one that's sitting still for us. Hopefully it will stay there long enough for us to get a good look at it. Let's see what we can do about making that picture just a little bit clearer. Let's see. We do this. Ah, yes. Here we go. This is a ciliate. Ciliates get their name from the little hairs that are all around their bodies, like this one has. Most of the little hairs are used for locomotion. They use them to wiggle around a little, and then either they can move food particles towards themselves or move themselves towards the food particles. This is a pretty one. It looks like it's winking at us. But I think those are actually just little vacuoles in its body. Here's another one. Oh, for this one you can see the little hairs fringing around its mouth here at the top. Now facing towards me. Isn't she a pretty one? This one has sort of a cone-shaped body. Lawnmower asks, what does it eat for food? Well, many ciliates will eat all kinds of things, but usually it's whatever's in the water around it. So if it fits in its mouth, usually they'll eat it. And in this case, that probably means diatoms and other algal particles and maybe some of the bacteria, or in some cases, other cilia, if they're small enough. Is she going to give me a little kiss? I wouldn't mind. Let's see what else we can find. This sample is a little bit of water, just a tiny bit of water that I collected earlier today from the surface of a local pond. And with some of that sort of unattractive pond scum that this was living on. But you can see that it's a interesting sort of little environment for all kinds of little organisms. All of these long stick-shaped objects that you see, they are living diatoms. And something you probably didn't realize is that diatoms can crawl around. And these ones are probably excited because they were in the dark, and now they're in the light of my microscope. Here's another little cute one. Hello, 1330749X. We are looking at live microscope images. And these are pond creatures, microscopic in scale. And we're about to zoom in on this one. Let's see. Can we zoom out a little bit? There we go. She's trying to get away from me. She's a shy one. What do they taste like? I think they are too small to taste. And what I mean is, I think they may be smaller than my taste buds. I'm gonna guess it doesn't taste good, though. These ones, these little long-necked ciliates, most of the time they kind of help decompose samples. The FT4444 wants to know, is that diatom? Well, the greenish things that you see are all diatoms, all around. So in these samples here, this sort of stuff, the stick-shaped stuff that you see, these are all diatoms. But that crawling thing with the little hairs around it, ooh, something popped up in the corner there. That's a ciliate. Now, she's trying to hide under the chat box. Always trying to escape. You can see she stretches her long little neck out, looking for something to nibble on. I think this one is perhaps Lacrimaria? Something like that. Some of the ciliates are, well, they're sort of challenging to identify, so I'm not very good at it. Am I a cat? Well, how could I be a cat and still be able to talk to you? I'm definitely a human. Don't I look like one? Who ever heard of a talking cat? Ridiculous. I think this one is a little rotifer, also crawling around amongst the diatoms, looking for a snack, something that will fit into its little mouth. I am not food, young lady. You can tell it's a rotifer if you look very carefully at the tail. What you'll see is it's not a tail at all. That's actually a foot. Let us find something else. Huh. Ooh. Here's another hungry little lady, stretching her long neck around like a dinosaur. Oh, she's pretty. Come back, young lady. Don't be shy. Diatoms are pretty passive for being eaten alive. Yes, this is true. One thing diatoms have going for them is that they can always make more. You know, like Doritos. You can crunch all you want. The diatoms will just make more. They clone themselves, sometimes as frequently as 3 or 4 times in one day. Also, there's very little they can do about being eaten. If something's big enough to fit them in their mouth, I think they're going in. Hello? This one is definitely Lacrimaria, with that long, long neck. And the little cilia. You see how she moves? Incredible. Whew, she's goosing me a bit. Here's something you probably didn't expect to see. A little tiny diatom, crawling around back here, behind all of this mass of whatever it is. Do you see how they crawl around? You've seen this on Spore, like the video game. Yeah, it's kind of similar. We could zoom in a little closer, I think. Hello, little diatom. This one, this is the diatom Gyro Sigma. It has that name because, well, it's sigmoid shape. Yes, crawling around, like diatoms do. Sometimes people think of them more like animals than plants, or what we sometimes call plantimals. That's a silly name. What else can we find? So many diatoms. One hungry little rotifer. Do you see how she's attached her foot? 2 little toes or 3 little toes in the back on that long sort of stem. And from there, sort of like as a base, she reaches out and tries to find something to eat. It does look a little bit like a galaxy. A tiny, tiny world. One that we can only observe with a microscope. Like little cosmonauts. This one's a little porky. Look at it. There it goes, waving the cilia around, trying to funnel diatoms into its mouth. Is it from stale water? Some of the sample I collected was from a pond, and some of it was from a small stream. But you're right, there isn't any green algae, and part of the reason for that is actually the time of year, because here where Dr. Mo lives, it's still not quite spring. And as a result, we still have a lot of diatoms which do okay in the cooler temperatures, but things like green algae, well, they usually like the temperatures to be a little bit warmer. "1330749X says they couldn't find a better way to spend Friday night. Get a little time in to relax and learn." That's a great idea. Welcome to my office hours. I hope you stick around. This little guy that we're looking at now, I think is a type of amoeba. It looks like a Heliozoa of some type. Like a snowman mixed together with a porcupine. Very interesting. All of these skinny, stick-shaped diatoms are actually, almost all of them, belong to the genus Ulnaria. And they live in little roseate colonies, attached at one end. When I was looking around at these samples a little earlier, I even saw a giant ostracod in here. But I don't know which sample it was in. So we may need to look around for a while. Sometimes if you look very carefully at these translucent ciliates, you can see what they've been eating. I think that one was eating some diatoms. Does anything bite into the shell of a diatom, or is the frustule always engulfed? This is a good question, actually. Sometimes, some organisms are strong enough to break diatoms into smaller pieces and fit them into their mouths. This is usually done by things like Daphnia. Some of the bigger organisms like Cladocera can actually snap long, skinny diatoms like this so they fit into their mouths a little bit better. But most of the time, they get eaten whole. The FT444 asks, algal bloom's season is affected by temperature. And it is. Diatoms usually are some of the first organisms to bloom. And it's often associated with cooler temperatures, which produce sort of a constant gradient in a lake, which allows it to mix more readily. And the diatoms usually do a little bit better because there's higher nutrients and silica available, which allows them to bloom. Here's another little rotifer. You can see the tail, which is actually toes, as I mentioned. It doesn't want to stay in our field of view, though. Oof, something's moving over here. Here is another Heliozoa. As I mentioned, it is a type of amoeba. This one, just one sphere, covered with these little spines sticking out in every direction. Actually a predator. If we are patient enough, it may start to crawl around a little. Shad the Hedgehog wants to know what are the biggest cells in this ecosystem. It's a little hard to tell what the scale is because it's coming through the camera onto my microscope and the scale bar is missing. But these ulnaria that you see here, these sort of long, skinny, stick-shaped diatoms, maybe 80 to 90 microns, something like that. And if we find an ostracod, well, it will take up the entire field of view. Something like maybe 400 or 500 microns, or even bigger sometimes. Some of the largest organisms we could find might sort of border on a couple of millimeters at most. More happy little diatoms crawling around. So your question about seasons having some control is a good one. Normally, there's something called a seasonal succession. And in lake systems, it goes something like diatoms first, early in the spring, and sometimes into late spring or summer. And then, typically, when all the silica has been used up out of the water, they are replaced, often by a dominance of green algae. And then when all of the nitrogen has been consumed, they are usually replaced by cyanobacteria. This one you can see little diatoms inside of it. Do you see those? Little tiny stick-shaped things inside of this one. It's actually engulfed entire diatoms and it's now digesting them as it carries them around. Can you see them? I am not a diatom. Do not bite me. Another lacrimaria, perhaps? I'm not sure what this one is. We can get very close, but it doesn't help. I still don't know what it is. does seem to be very excited, though. Another diatom just sort of trucking around. Solneedle wants to know, are there any parasites? Are any of these considered parasitic? There are parasites that occur. Viruses are common in these kinds of environments, and there are some bacteria as well. Most of the bacteria are just decomposers, but there are viruses that affect a large number of these sorts of organisms. Unfortunately, we don't know a lot about them. Because everything is so small. There have been several recent papers that sort of cover the topic of viruses and diatoms and viruses and other microscopic organisms. Whew. Have I already gone over the anatomy of each type? I don't think I've gone over anything, really. We've just sort of browsing around. But we could talk about whatever you like. You ask questions, and I will try to answer them. Some sort of paramecium, I think. Do you see the little cilia, like a fringe, sort of crossing over the body, diagonally? Right here. Whew, that tickles. How many samples do you normally study in a day? Or whatever the microscopic version of a kilocalorie is. Yes, how many do I normally sample in a day? Well, it just depends on what sort of project I'm studying. These I just collected for you. Something for us to look at during my office hours and to entertain us with these gorgeous ciliates and diatoms. What is my favorite extremophile? I still haven't revealed this. I'm saving it. But I am very fond of diatoms, and, well, they are extremophiles. Did I get this from a pond? Yes. This is material that was collected from a pond. Actually, I think this sample, maybe I collected from a stream that was near the pond. In fact, the stream trickles into the pond. I sort of collected from a number of sites and then mixed some of it together. But when I sampled this, I sort of sampled it from the river part. Another ciliate. An amoeba. Do you see it? It's behind me. There she is. Watch. Very slowly moving through the sample. Boop. How big of a difference is looking at freshwater versus saltwater samples? They're actually very different. In terms of what you might find, they may still be full of diatoms, but most freshwater systems have totally different sort of groups of these, often at the genus, sometimes at the family level. But many of the same kinds of organisms are present in the ocean. So there are amoeba, there are diatoms, there are rotifers, there are all kinds of algae that are also found in marine systems. It's just that they would be very different, sort of those that could tolerate high salinities or alkalinities that you might find in those settings. Are diatoms abundant in streams? They are. Some of them anyway. Here comes a few crawling right into our field of view. This one, like an aircraft carrier, has a bunch of little tiny organisms attached to it. You wonder what we'd find in salt water? Well, I have a surprise. One of these office hours, I will bring in some saltwater material, and we can look at it. I may even have a guest who will talk a little bit about it. It should be fun. Guest speakers would be fun, don't you think? We could hang out. You could ask them questions. I could ask them questions. And then I don't have to answer so many questions. Ooh. Another rotifer. Let's take a look in another sample. What do you think? Yeah? Okay. Still diatoms. Although not as dense. Did you see the little hairs on the backside that it's using to crawl around? Little hairs covering its body are called cilia. As I mentioned, this is how they move from place to place. Sometimes they use them to funnel food into their mouths. This one's out hunting. They are predators. So a little colony of diatoms and a crawler, a little benthic diatom crawling around. Are you asking about water bears, Deb? I don't think we have any water bears tonight. I did collect some moss from next to one of the streams, but I've had very little luck looking for water bears in streams, so I think it unlikely. Diatoms we have plenty of. I suppose keep your eye peeled, perhaps we'll see a water bear. Say this sample is a little boring compared to the other one. There is a lot more space, though. I think perhaps a tiny amoeba. Are there any notable deep sea microorganisms? Yes, of course. I don't know if I could capture any deep sea organisms. I don't have a friend who could collect those for us either. How do the cilia coordinate with each other? I have no idea. How do we distinct a small cell from a non-cell object? Normally I would be able to tell by the outline and also if it's moving, and sometimes you can see internal body parts, like the cell here. There's fat vacuoles or something in there. So that was a cell of some type. I don't know if it's still alive. Moving is an easy way to tell, though. See, as before, I was talking about how these diatoms form little rosettes, all attached by one end. And you can see I've dislodged one of them right here, just a little. There they are in their life position, with each of the diatoms attached on one end. Some will attach, and they can also detach and crawl around. If conditions become unfavorable, they might do this. Let's try a different slide. Ooh. We're rewarded with a little diatom crawling around. Two little diatoms crawling around. I think this is probably Pinularia and a little Navicula. For as extreme as water bears are made out to be, are they not killed or terminated by snails? Yes, water bears are indestructible more or less only in their hibernation state. Crawling around, they're vulnerable to anything that might eat them, and even in their hibernation state, they could be eaten by something. They're not indestructible. They're just highly resistant in that state. Look at this little guy. He's going crazy. Yes, it's called a cryptobiotic state or a tune state sometimes, and usually when they dry out. Why are they so hyperactive? They're probably excited because the water is a lot warmer now. When I collected it, it was pretty close to freezing, but on the microscope, it heats up. The light is like a tiny easy bake oven. Only we're not making brownies. Ooh. This looks like perhaps it's an amoeba, and it's splitting into two. I don't know how long we would have to wait before they separate, though. I think the metabolism is somewhat controlled by the temperature of the water, such that when the water warms up, they begin looking for food a lot faster. The amoebas, however, are always sort of slow-paced. I think I'm going to have to make some more slides. What's the little string in the middle? I don't know what you're talking about. I missed it. Let's see what this one is hiding. More diatoms. A rotifer. Oh, she's fast. You can tell it's a rotifer always by looking at the tail. It should always have claws. Oh, she's escaped from under the slide. Here we go. Always have a tail that looks like maybe 2 or 3 little claws, but it's actually their foot. And then on the head of any rotifer, provided you could get it to slow down, a ring of cilia will appear around their mouths. This one is way too fast for me to keep up with. The little ring of cilia is called a corona, and they use it to eat with. So instead of using the cilia to move, they actually use it to bring food towards their mouth, or particles towards their mouth. Yes, it's like Etch-a-Sketch. The splitting amoeba, yes. So this is actually Spirogyra. So you can tell Spirogyra from other types of algae because the chloroplasts create a spiral that goes through the middle. It looks like a helix, a single helix usually. And different species of Spirogyra will have all kinds of interesting patterns. Each one of the cells are divided like this from one to the next, always with a helix of chloroplasts. How would the sample look if it were still cold? Yes, everything would probably just move a little bit slower, except for maybe the diatoms, which, as I mentioned, don't really care about the temperature. There's another little amoeba, a Heliozoan. It doesn't look like it's in good shape, though. This is a ciliate of some type. It's not moving much, but seems to be alive. And a diatom crawling right through. Are Spirogyra and Spirulina the same? No. Spirulina usually live in highly alkaline systems in places like Africa, and they're feasted upon by flamingos. How much? Oh, as much as I know how dangerous it can be, I'm curious what it can do to me if I ingest these. Probably nothing to you. I mean, they're so small, and your stomach acid is so strong. Likely they would just be digested. Diatoms are completely harmless, so most of the sample, although it would probably taste poor, is filled with diatoms. Then they don't really have toxic diatoms in freshwater settings, but there are toxic diatoms in the marine realm. Pseudonychia. But you would have to eat a lot of them in order to get sick. She's a pretty one. Busy digesting something, I think. Another strand of Spirogyra. Chloroplasts ribbon-shaped, always in a spiral. Very cool. I like it because it's so easy to identify. Here's a little colony of diatoms in a ribbon, sort of zipper-shaped colony, some sort of tiny fragillaria. Here's some diatoms, all attached to the outside of this pieces of plant. A rotifer. Some more diatoms, these ones planktic, just waiting for a current to carry them away. Look at this little tiny ciliate. Oop. Huh. Someone asked earlier, are amoebas not dangerous to humans? Most amoeba are not dangerous to humans, but there is an amoeba that has been called a brain-eating amoeba, and sometimes they are found, mostly they're found in hot springs and hot streams, but they have been found in some lakes. And they get this name because I believe they crawl up your nose into your brain and then, yes, as it sounds, eat your brains. Another ciliate. You see the little hairs all around her? You would totally watch a movie called The Brain-Eating Amoebas from Outer Space. Yes, I think I would watch this too. Perhaps with a set of robots at my side as we made fun of it. Mystery Science Theater style. Darwin fan says I have an irrational fear of brain-eating amoeba. Yes. I suppose if they're going to attack you, there's not much you can do about it. It's another Heliozoan. Piece of plant. You can see the little plant cells. This one's covered with diatoms. And also some others. Spirogyra, again, Little rotifer. Hello. Two of them. Another lacrimaria. Able to stretch their long necks out. You can see the little fine hairs around its body, just barely creating some sort of distortion around the back end there. Very pretty. Also voracious. Hello. We have found an ostracod, and it is way too big. Hello. Ostracods have a hard external carapace made of calcium carbonate, and then the little legs stick out the bottom. Called seed shrimp sometimes. This one is sitting very still for us. I like to think of them as little jelly beans. Hideous jelly beans with legs that stick out and crawl around. Some ostracods actually have little eye spots. Oh, we can see its legs moving. It's huge, for sure. And these little hairs that you see sticking off the front end tell us that it is an adult ostracod. It's just got the little tiniest little whisker of its legs sticking out the front. Look how long they are. Forbidden jelly bean, of course. What do they call those jelly beans that taste like vomit? You know, or dog food, or sometimes they're made like to taste like grass or something. Bean boozled, yes. Maybe it's sweet, maybe it's disgusting. This one seems like maybe it's disgusting. I would put my money on disgusting for this one. The booger flavored one is pretty good. Is it salty? Hello, little rotifer. You've entered a dangerous territory. Let's let her rest. Oh, that one is so big. That's an air bubble. It's several diatoms carrying around a pile of junk with them by accident. I think this is a little ciliate. It's not moving. There's so many cool little things in these ponds. I feel like we could do this all night and still never find the end of it. Oop. Something escaped me. Tiny little diatoms crawling around. What is the rarest microorganism we could find? This is a good question. I've been looking for what is it called? Vampire amoeba or something like that. They crawl along and suck the insides out of algae. Pretty interesting. I think they like to crawl along a spirogyra and just suck the bits out, one at a time, growing bigger and bigger as they go. But I've never found one. They kind of remind me of, what's that video game where you roll around as a ball and consume chairs and stuff? Yeah, something like that. They're found in lakes and little ponds, so we should be able to find them around. I just never have. Golden algae, like Senora, or well, I've seen some golden algae in these samples actually. The Denobrian are in here, or pieces of them are anyway. Senora are usually a little more common in the winter time. But I have seen some Denobrian, which are a type of golden algae. It's a little Heliozoan. It's a long colony of diatoms with a bunch of little diatoms growing off of it, using it as a substrate. Yes, Katamari, exactly. Amoeba always remind me of that game. They just crawl around, consuming everything as they go. Yes, probably very rare in tropical environments because they like colder temperatures and clearer water, typically. Oh, she's gorgeous. And just sitting there. A little rotifer hiding amongst the diatoms. I think a tiny epistylus. Do you see waving its little cilia around? Attached on this long thread-like connection. Well, I don't mean to keep you all night staring at things in my microscope. It's already 15 minutes past my office hours. But let's look for one more thing, and if you have any more questions, now would be a time to ask. And then we'll call it an evening. I want to thank you for hanging out with me as we browse around in the tiny world of this few drops of water. Always fascinating. It seems like I have just started. Oh, maybe we will end here with this Lacrimaria. She does not want to be photographed. I'm hoping for next week, office hours, will include some more aquatic organisms on the microscope. But for now, I think we'll call it an evening. Thanks again for hanging out, and my next lecture will be on Thursday, and I'm not quite sure what we're going to be talking about, but I think I was planning on immortality and regeneration in organisms. And I think with that, perhaps we'll call it an evening. Until next time, good night.